and welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm working on a personal short film project called Blouie Sam. I do it in my free time to work on something fun and also to learn something new. I plan to do videos like this where I talk about certain aspects of my work, so hopefully that's interesting to you. Let's start with a friendly face. This is Blouie, one of the two main characters of my animation. So we're going to add fur to my character Blouie today. As you see, it's a fairly minimal object. It's a low poly model. So first thing we do is we add a modifier, a multi-resolution, subdivided. So looking much better now. So the next thing we do, selecting one part of the object, I'm selecting similar material because everything that is skin is already one material. Go to show hide and hide unselected. I have already done that. Now we can select everything that is going to get fur. I'm going to the object properties and I'm going to add a new map. So, and this weight map is going to be named head, and you have to hit assign. And to see what you have done, you're going to weight paint, and now you see everything you selected has a value of 1. And you can of course paint the weight map. I have mirror mode enabled, and then I'm going to soften the edge to the body. So okay, looking good. Back into object mode. And now we're going to add a particle system for the head, and we call it head. And we call this also head. And we change to hair. And now you can see that it's applied everywhere on all the skin. So we're going into the vertex groups and we choose head as density. And now you can see it's only growing on the head. And we're going to raise the number to have an even. So we raise the number and we lower the hair length. Think even a little bit lower. 0.4. So, and all you have to do is change to particle edit, and now you can start to give him the hair that you want. And you have to be very careful with that, and there are a few things that you have to consider when doing that. Of course, the first thing to consider is how would real fur behave. And so basically for my character it's growing to the top like a rabbit maybe. And my character has also hair on, not the teeth, but on the eyes, at least on the eyelids. So you have to take care to comp it in the right direction. And when you notice that you have an area where there's very little fur, that's because it is not very evenly distributed, then you can add hair, and I would actually just put hair where you need to. And once you have the mirror mode enabled, you see that for placing hair, it's perfectly mirrored, while the hair that is automatically generated via the emission is not mirrored. So you could start by using no hair from the emission and just add hair wherever you need it to have a better distribution of the hair. But that's not what I wanted, so I would start with an emission and add hair where I need it. That would be my tip. You can also shrink the hair length. That is, for example, on the eyelids a good idea, and also on the forehead for my character, and around the mouth. So the hair is a bit shorter here. You see it's working all right. So, and again, when you change something, you might need to comp again, because the hair changes the appearance. And if there's some hair that you like to get rid of, you can always just cut it. Like, for example, here. You could also use cut to remove the unwanted hair. So, and once you're satisfied with comping the hair, of course I am not satisfied with this, but for the sake of the short little explanation, I think that's okay. So what you want to do is add child emitter for the hair. And if you now change to render mode, you will notice that the hair is very, very thin. And the settings that you can choose, for example, with the hair shape, they don't really matter for Octane, of course. So you have to use the Octane hair settings. And first thing is we should make the hair a bit wider, and so that would be around, I guess, 2 millimeters in real life. And what you also need to do is for the W coordinate, that's the length of the hair. So you have to choose a length that is similar to the length that you set in the beginning. And then you can add a gradient, for example, to have the hair where it starts a bit darker and a bit lighter in the end. We're going to add a new material, and the material will be hair, in my case skin hair, and it's not a universal material but a hair material. These are all Octane materials. And we're going back into the hair settings, and we have to choose the material, and it is skin hair. So now we see the material here being applied to the hair. There's also a little tip for the Blender UI, and when you go to the edge, then you can open a new window, and we're going to choose the shader editor to see the hair material. You see we're under the mesh and skin hair. That's applied to the hair here. And now what we can do is add a gradient. It's a gradient, and we're going to need the W coordinate, which is here. So when we add that to the texture and the output to the albedo, and then we can choose a texture. And on the tip, for my character, I want him to to have very blue hair. So I'm going to use a brighter blue color and a darker blue color on the base of the hair. You can see that it's darker at the base and lighter on the top. That's it for the base setup. Here are the settings for the hairstyle I ended up using on the head. Note that I used 20,000 emitted hair particles, not just 4,000. On the body I used very similar settings. Here's my final setup. You see I have separated hair systems for the body and for the head. Here's the head setup. It's fairly short hair. And it's also a lot of hair. So if I choose the particle edit mode, you see that there's very much hair is divided and you can still edit the hair quite well. And you see that there's a high number of emission hair. And of course you can't change any of these settings once you edited the hair, combed it in the right directions. And it's important to comb the hair in the way it would grow on a real animal, for example, towards the nose, to the top, around the eyes, and on the back of the head, back down. And if you want to have strands that are a bit longer, then you should choose another hair setup. And you can always start with one setup and duplicate it. You just have to remember to add new settings for the hair by clicking new particle settings. And then you can adjust these hairs as well. Once you go to object mode, then you see a preview of the generated hair. And I have for all the hair on this character one material that is applied in the hair settings. That I have here. It's hair. It's the basic hair material. And if we go to render, you have to remember that I'm rendering with the preview hair settings, which means that we have for the long hair, let's go to children. It's half the amount of hair for the long hair, and for the smaller hair it's a third of the hair. But for preview, I think that's all we need. So, and a very basic setup for the hair. I like to keep it very modular. That means I have one map for the character's belly. I have one map for the eye, and it's all just a black and white map. So if we go to texture paint, and you can see that you could just paint on this map with black material. The map we're working on is basically invisible here, because here we have the texture slot. It's a single image and we are working on skin darker. That's actually a map I don't use. What we have is a skin map, which is for the belly, as I said. It's black and white, so I can choose the color in my shader. We have the darker eyes, which is only the eyes. I could also paint on here and give him black nose holes or something like that. But I won't do that, of course. And I have a separate mouse piece for the dark mouse, which is now actually brighter than the rest because I changed that. So back to the object mode and into our shader. And what I did is I haven't really cleaned up my shader setup because, well, once it's done, I'm not going to look into it actually. So what we have here is a gradient that is the gradient to define the hair. So to give the hair a bit of variation, I have a noise texture added with a fairly low scale, and there's the variation of that. It's a mixed texture. Part of the hair has the original color and a very little amount has a different color. And with the setup you can define where it's going to be a bit spotty in places. And once I added the variation here, I have the material for this mixed texture. It's basically the skin for the belly. So here it's brighter or darker, as you can see. And I have another mixed texture. Here it's defined the area around the eyes, dark eyes. So basically that he has this wonderful bright and awake look on his face. And then there's the dark mouth, which I actually have a little bit brighter, so to have the teeth stand out a bit better. Yeah, that's the basic setup. And once you are done with that, you maybe would want to have dynamics on the hair, and you have to enable them for all the groups that you define for the hair, and you do it with the hair dynamics. If you enable them, you can choose settings for the collision and for the structure and so on. If you use basic settings that are here, then you can just create the cache for this animation, for the hair dynamics, and you would do that by animating the character, and then you're going to calculate to frame, and you would have to choose disk cache, of course, and then that's basically all there is to do. And once you check to bake all dynamics, it's also going to bake the other ones if they are enabled, just like that. And I did a little hair preview, which you can see here. And it's also just two different groups of hair. One is glowing and one is the base fur. I have no interaction between the two, but I just wanted to see how the dynamics would render, and it's working quite nicely, I think. And of course, if I animate my character, I already posed him, and it's the first impression that I did for the preview render. Then the hair, of course, is doing what the character is doing. So you have to be aware when you change the resolution of the modifier, then you're going to lose all your hard combed hair, as you see. So that is something you have to decide in advance. The subdivision level also affects the performance. At level 2, you see it's responding pretty fast and nice. And now we're going to the modifiers and we choose another subdivision level. So now we have a higher setting for the subdivision, and let's choose 4. And of course you're losing your edit with that, and what you can do to start a new one is delete edit, and now you can start again. And what you will notice is that it's impossible to work, even when the setting itself for the subdivision is not very high. So at a certain level, you would have to apply the multi-res modifier. And when you're now in edit mode, you see it's a bit more usable again, but I think it's a little bit unsatisfying. So back to the settings that we already have. A few things about my render setup. You can choose in the world setup for all the settings regarding the environment. I have a plain gray background. It's also just actually for the preview because I haven't really done a scene for my character yet, but of course it's all coming. He's going to have a cockpit in where he can steer the ship, the Mariah carrier, and he's also going to get a friend, which is the character Sam, and for him there will be a few more challenges than just adding fur, because there's also going to be cloth animation and stuff like that, and yeah, it's going to be quite interesting. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, we have two kinds of variation for the fur, and the one thing is the one variation that we have is of course the noise texture that we applied here, and the other one is within the hair material, because there we have the random frequency, and if I lower this to a setting like 0.2, you will see that there are bigger areas that are different now, like that, and you can see it if I raise the intensity, that he is a bit spotty. I want this to be a very, very subtle effect, so he has kind of like a few splotches here and there, and yeah, I think that's quite a nice look. So if you're interested in how to animate the character, because I have this very nice plugin for the animation, and let me close this window here. So, and what I don't need for the animation is a fur to slow the feedback down. So what I have here is the rig setup, and I'm using a plugin called Auto Rig Pro, and it's fairly easy, and I need to add some visual representation for the eyes, but the thing is, if I change to render mode and I'm going to pose mode and I'm choosing the eyes, then I can see exactly where my character is going to look, of course, and with OpenGL that would be much, much faster. So yeah, this is something I need to change, and with the setup it's fairly easy to give him new and interesting looks, and yeah, I'm really happy with this plugin because it's working quite nicely. I haven't really made the final adjustments for all the parts. I mean, it's just the teeth and the mouth. It's already working quite nicely, and I also already rigged the tongue, and I can pull the tongue out, of course, and stuff like that. So it's quite fun. My eyes, I might have might have chosen the wrong basic setup for the eyes, because my eyes are like a bit tilted. So whenever I do close the eyes or open the eyes, I now have the problem that I have to rotate this little handle here. But you have enough control over all these aspects, and now you can quite easily change all the expressions for closing the eye and opening the eye. And okay, he's having a very stupid look on his face now. Yeah, it's very flexible and very easy, and so I'm quite satisfied. Yeah, good thing that the tongue is back in the mouth. Yeah, it's really good setup, and if you are going to work with that, I think there are of course a few things that I need to learn with this Autorig Pro, but so far it's working very nicely, especially as rigging is not the most fun work in creating a character. So basically that's what I wanted to show you. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'll try to answer everything. See you in the next video. Bye bye.